In my time here on YouTube, I've made 4 videos covering horrifying incidents that happen live, and these incidents are things that happen with an audience present, but not necessarily on camera. This is not that. This is an Iceberg video going over deaths that did all happen on camera. The categories are homicide/execution, failed stunts, natural causes, animal attacks, accidents, and of course that one cause starting with S that we aren't allowed to say. This Iceberg was made by Gorehound over on Reddit, by the way, and just like the evil YouTuber's Iceberg, this will be in 2 parts. Here's the Deaths Caught on Camera Iceberg, Part 1. By the way, there's a good chance I will have had to remove 1 or 2 entries to get this video monetized, but the full video will be on Patreon if you want to see what I may or may not have had to remove. Well, I suppose it only makes sense to start things off with the most infamous on-camera death ever. You don't need me to tell you who President John F. Kennedy is, let's be honest. Let's just get into why he's on here. John F. Kennedy traveled to Dallas, Texas on November 22, 1963, as part of a 2-day political tour aimed at building support for his 1964 re-election campaign and healing a rift in the Texas Democratic Party. That day at noon, the President and First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy rode through downtown Dallas in an open-top limousine, heading to a lunch where Kennedy was scheduled to speak. Thousands of spectators lined the streets as the motorcade made its way toward the Dallas Trade Mart venue, giving the trip a hopeful public atmosphere. Shortly after 12:30 p.m., as the presidential motorcade passed through Dealey Plaza, multiple gunshots were fired from a 6th-floor window of the Texas School Book Depository. President Kennedy was struck by 2 bullets, one that entered through his upper back and exited via his throat, and a second fatal shot that hit the back of his head. The head wound in particular was catastrophic. This attack was captured in its entirety on an 8mm film by a bystander, Abraham Zapruder. In that silent footage, we can see the exact moment the fatal bullet struck the president's head. In the immediate aftermath, the limousine lurched forward and sped toward Parkland Memorial Hospital. A Secret Service agent jumped onto the moving car as Jacqueline Kennedy cradled her mortally wounded husband, with her pink suit stained with his blood. The motorcade rushed to the hospital, but the massive head injury was unsurvivable. About 30 minutes after the shooting, at 1 p.m., John F. Kennedy was officially pronounced dead.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.
Brandon Lee was close to finishing The Crow, a dark atmospheric action movie that was meant to push him beyond the long shadow of his father, Bruce Lee. On the night of March 30th, 1993, Wilmington's Stage 4 had been turned into a dim apartment set, scattered with breakaway glass and blank firing weapons. Earlier in the week, the prop crew had pulled live slugs from .44 caliber cartridges to make them look authentic for a close-up, then left one casing's primer intact. When the round was dry-fired, its bullet crept into the barrel and stayed there, unseen. No one ran a rod through the bore before loading the gun again, this time with full charge blanks meant to flash, not kill. Just after midnight, the camera rolled on the scene where the gang leader shoots Eric Draven. Actor Michael Massey raised the revolver. The blank detonated, and a large slug blasted free at point-blank range. The crew heard a pop only slightly louder than usual, then watched Lee crumble, clutching his side, with blood booming through his thin black shirt. At first glance, some thought he was staying in character, then the real horror set in. Paramedics sprinted across the set lights, cutting away the costume while a boom mic dangled overhead, still live. Surgeons fought for 6 hours at New Hanover Regional Hospital before Lee was declared dead at 28, leaving the editing room with a gap no reshoot could fill. The footage of the accident was eventually destroyed, and Michael Massey was so scarred from the event that he reportedly never watched the film right up until his own death from stomach cancer in 2016. Tommy Cooper was a British comedian and magician, best known for his chaotic stage persona, botched magic tricks, and a trademark red fez. At 6'4", with a lumbering presence, he had audiences roaring with laughter at his bumbling routines and corny one-liners. But by the early 1980s, years of heavy drinking and chain smoking had taken a serious toll on his health. He reportedly smoked up to 40 cigars a day and had already suffered a heart attack on stage in 1977. Even so, Cooper struggled to cut back on his habits, and by 1984, the 63-year-old entertainer was in frail shape. In fact, when he arrived at London's Her Majesty's Theatre for a TV performance on April 15, 1984, staff noticed he looked especially weak. They even set up a makeshift dressing room backstage so he wouldn't have to climb any stairs. That evening, Cooper took to the stage on the variety special Live from Her Majesty's, broadcast live to a theatre full of fans and millions of viewers at home. Partway through his act, a jumble of magic tricks and gags, Cooper suddenly collapsed onto the floor. At first, everyone assumed it was just another one of his comic pratfalls. His assistant smiled as he hit the ground, and the audience laughed, unaware that he was actually suffering a massive heart attack. Cooper fell backward against the stage curtains, and one eyewitness recalled seeing his legs twitching slightly as he lay on the floor. The crowd was still chuckling, thinking it was all part of the act. For several seconds, TV cameras kept rolling on the unsettling scene before the director finally cut to an unscheduled commercial break. Afterwards, the program continued. Rather than alert the audience to the emergency, the producers sent out the next performers and carried on as if nothing was wrong. Comedians Les Dennis and Dustin Gee went on to do their routine in front of the closed curtain, while just behind them, Cooper was being frantically treated by stagehands and a doctor. They later admitted as they performed they could hear the thud of CPR chest compressions and groans from behind the curtain. Other acts followed, even a musical number, all taking place mere feet from where Cooper collapsed out of sight. Meanwhile, paramedics were trying to revive the fallen comedian. Cooper was finally taken by ambulance to the Westminster Hospital, but he never regained consciousness. He was pronounced dead later that night at the age of 63. Steve Irwin grew up wrangling reptiles at his parents' wildlife park in Queensland and turned that childhood into the global juggernaut that was the TV show The Crocodile Hunter. By 2006, the 44-year-old zoo director, conservationist, and television host had filmed in more than 130 countries and was working on a new special called Ocean's Deadliest off Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Bad weather stalled the main shoot on September 4th, so Irwin, his producer John Stainton, and cameraman Justin Lyons motored to the shallow sand flats off Bat Reef to grab filler footage for his 8-year-old daughter's show, Bindi the Jungle Girl. A short-tailed stingray, roughly 2 meters across, lay on the seabed. Irwin planned to drift above it so the camera could capture the ray gliding away. As he hovered, the animal suddenly reared and struck, driving the serrated barb of its tail through the left side of Irwin's chest and into his heart. Lyons kept rolling. The water around Irwin clouded red as he surfaced, clutching the wound. On the deck, he managed one look at his friend and gasped, "I'm dying," before losing consciousness. Crew applied CPR while the boat dashed for a nearby low island, the camera still resting a few feet away, tape spinning. Blood pulsed through Irwin's shirt with every compression. Paramedics were waiting on the sand, but the jagged barb had pierced Irwin's heart in multiple places. They pronounced him dead at 2:26 p.m. The master tape, one of the only human deaths by stingray ever caught on film, was sealed away and handed to authorities, then returned to Irwin's family. Stainton says it has since been destroyed and will never be released. Dale Earnhardt Sr. was a renowned NASCAR driver with 7 Winston Cup championships. Known as the Intimidator for his aggressive driving style, Earnhardt had become a racing icon by the time of the 2001 Daytona 500. On February 18, 2001, during the Daytona 500, Earnhardt was running third on the final lap when he was involved in a fatal accident. As the field entered the last turn, his black No. 3 Chevrolet made slight contact with Sterling Marlin's car, causing him to lose control. Earnhardt attempted to correct the slide and veered back up the track, colliding with Ken Schrader's vehicle. His car then collided head-on with the concrete wall at about 155 to 160 miles per hour. The force of the impact tore off the car's right rear wheel and caused the hood to swing open and slam against the windshield.
No! Big trouble! Big wreck behind them! Beat him back! Come on! To the flag!
Come on, Mikey, you got it, man. You got it! You got it! You got it!
Oh, man!
This is great. I just hope Dale's okay. I guess he's all right, isn't he?
You okay? You okay?
Both cars slid down into the infield grass and came to a stop. Schrader immediately ran to check on Earnhardt. Finding him unresponsive, he pulled down Earnhardt's window net and urgently signaled for medics. Schrader described what he saw only in vague terms, saying, quote, "It don't look good." Years later, he admitted that when he looked inside the wrecked car, he knew instantly that Earnhardt was dead. Earnhardt was extracted from the car and rushed to the nearby Halifax Medical Center. He was pronounced dead there at 5:16 p.m. An autopsy determined that he had sustained a fatal skull fracture at the moment of impact, a severe head injury that killed him instantly. He was 49 years old. The crash occurred on live television in front of 17 million viewers.
This is undoubtedly one of the toughest announcements that I've ever personally had to make. But after the accident and turn 4 at the end of the Daytona 500, we've lost Dale Earnhardt.
Jesse Onfray, better known as XXX Tentacion, moved from posting raw tracks on SoundCloud to topping the Billboard 200 with his 2018 album Question Mark, while still facing assault charges and public brawls that made him as notorious as he was popular. On June 18, 2018, he left his home in Parkland, Florida, with $50,000 in cash, planning to pick out a new motorcycle at Riva Motorsports in nearby Deerfield Beach. Security cameras inside the showroom caught him browsing bikes while two men loitered behind him, then slipped outside to a rented black Dodge Journey, waiting at the curb. At 3:56 p.m., Onfray climbed into his BMW and rolled toward the exit. The SUV swerved in front, boxing him in. Two gunmen jumped out, rifles raised. A struggle through the driver's window lasted barely 40 seconds. One man yanked at his diamond chain, while the other fired a short-barreled rifle, 3 rounds punching into Onfray's neck and torso. They ripped a Louis Vuitton bag stuffed with cash off the passenger seat and sped away. The ambush played out in full view of the dealership's exterior camera, and within minutes, onlookers were filming the aftermath on their phones, posting clips of the 20-year-old slumped motionless behind the wheel as blood pooled across the white leather. Paramedics reached the scene quickly and found a faint pulse, but the bullets had torn his aorta. He was pronounced dead at 4:51 p.m. The surveillance tapes later became key evidence at the 2023 murder trial, where jurors watched the holdup unfold frame by frame before convicting 3 men of first-degree murder. Saddam Hussein led Iraq as president from 1979 until 2003. He was overthrown after a US-led invasion and went into hiding, but was captured by American forces in December 2003. In November 2006, an Iraqi tribunal convicted Saddam of crimes against humanity for ordering the killing of 148 Shiite villagers in Dujail in 1982, following an assassination attempt against him. The former president was sentenced to death by hanging as a result of this conviction. The execution took place just before dawn on December 30, 2006, at an Iraqi military base in Baghdad. Iraqi state television released official footage showing Saddam being escorted to the gallows and a noose placed around his neck. He appeared calm and refused to wear a hood over his head as the noose was fitted. The official video stopped before the actual hanging, but a cell phone recording by a witness captured what happened next. In the leaked video, several onlookers can be heard taunting Saddam, shouting insults and chanting the name of Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. Saddam, still composed, exchanged words with the crowd, at one point asking if they were acting in a manly way, and began reciting the Islamic Shahada prayer. Midway through his prayer, the trapdoor was released, and Saddam dropped through the gallows floor. The footage ends shortly after his death, and it spread rapidly online, sparking international controversy over the disturbing content of the execution video. It's also one of the videos that first brought attention to LiveLeak. Jeffrey Paul Doucette was a 25-year-old karate instructor from Port Arthur, Texas, who moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1983 and quickly became a fixture at local dojos. He zeroed in on one pupil, 11-year-old Jody Plauché, grooming the boy with after-class drives and sleepovers no one thought to question. On February 14, 1984, he drove Jody across the country to a motel in Anaheim, California, dyed the child's hair, and spent the next 10 days on the run before an FBI Trace for Collect call led agents to room 38. Doucette was arrested without a struggle and booked as a fugitive awaiting extradition to Louisiana. Later on March 16, 1984, police escorted him, shackled, through Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport. A WBRZ news crew was filming the perp walk. Opposite their tripod stood Jody's father, Gary Plauché, wearing a baseball cap and talking into a payphone receiver. As Doucette passed, Plauché turned around, raised a .38 special revolver, and fired once into the right side of Doucette's head. All of this occurred on camera. Officers wrestled Gary against the phone, with the audio catching a stunt detective yelling, "Why, Gary, why?" Doucette never regained consciousness. Surgeons at OK Long Memorial removed fragments of the shattered slug, but could not hold the swelling in his brain. He was pronounced dead early the next morning, March 17, 1984. Ayrton Senna had already claimed 3 Formula One World Championships with McLaren when he switched to Williams for 1994, fighting a nervous, quote, aerodynamically unstable chassis while chasing Michael Schumacher in the early rounds. The San Marino Grand Prix opened under a pole, Rubens Barrichello's violent Friday crash, and Roland Ratzenberger's fatal qualifying wreck had left the paddock shaken, yet Senna insisted on racing, taping an Austrian flag in his cockpit to wait for Ratzenberger if he won. At 2:17 p.m. on May 1st, on lap 7, Senna's FW16 hit the flat-out Tamburillo left harder at 309 km/h, twitched, and ran straight offline. He braked hard, but still struck the unprotected concrete at 211 km/h. Television viewers saw only a brief plume of dust before the Williams ricocheted to a stop, with the nose and right front wheel gone. For 10 seconds, the cockpit was motionless, then his head lifted fractionally and fell, the last sign of life. The impact catapulted the wheel assembly into the cockpit, a suspension arm piercing the bell visor just above Senna's right eye and shattering his skull, but scans confirmed massive brain trauma. After 2 cardiac arrests, doctors declared Senna dead at 6:40 p.m., drawing the darkest weekend in modern Grand Prix racing to a close. We started this tier with JFK, and now we're moving on to the man who probably shot him. Lee Harvey Oswald was a former US Marine who became the alleged assassin of President John F. Kennedy in November 1963. Kennedy was fatally shot on November 22, 1963 in Dallas, and Oswald was arrested later that day after allegedly killing a Dallas police officer, J.D. Tibbett, while fleeing the scene. He was charged with both murders and interrogated for 2 days at Dallas Police Headquarters. Oswald denied any involvement in Kennedy's assassination, calling himself a, quote, patsy, and insisting he hadn't shot anyone. On the morning of November 24, 1963, just 2 days after JFK's assassination, Oswald was being led through the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters for a jail transfer. A crowd of police and reporters were present, with live TV cameras rolling. As Oswald walked into the basement garage, Jack Ruby, a local nightclub owner, suddenly stepped forward from the crowd and fired a single .38 caliber revolver shot into Oswald's abdomen at point-blank range. The attack was captured on live television, with millions of viewers watching at home. Oswald doubled over and collapsed to the concrete floor as detectives tackled and disarmed Ruby, every moment broadcast live. Mortally wounded, Oswald was rushed to the Parkland Memorial Hospital. Doctors attempted to save him, but he was pronounced dead about an hour later, in an operating room only 2 feet away from where President Kennedy had died 2 days before. Karl Wallender was a German high-wire artist and founder of the famous Flying Wallender's family acrobatic troupe. Renowned for his daring feats, like multi-person pyramids on a tightrope, he performed most of his stunts without a safety net. Over a career spanning decades, Wallender pushed the limits of high-wire performance with unwavering resolve. On March 22, 1978, The 73-year-old Walenda attempted another high-wire walk in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The stunt was a promotional event for a circus show he was headlining with his granddaughter, and it required him to cross a cable strung between two 10-story hotel towers about 120 feet above the ground. As usual, no safety net was in place. Strong ocean winds were gusting that day, but Walenda, who had helped rig the wire himself, appeared unconcerned by the conditions as he started his walk between the towers. A sudden gust of wind made the wire sway and caused Walenda to lose his balance. In front of hundreds of spectators below, he crouched down on the wire and gripped it with one hand, trying to steady himself while still holding his long balancing pole in the other. Walenda struggled in the precarious position, attempting to regain stability on the swaying cable. Unfortunately, he could not re-establish his balance. Moments later, Walenda lost his grip and fell from the wire, plummeting approximately 10 stories to the ground. Still clutching his pole, Walenda struck a parked taxi on the way down before hitting the pavement. The fatal fall was captured on live video as a local TV crew was broadcasting the event in real time. He was rushed to a nearby hospital, but his injuries were unsurvivable. Walenda was pronounced dead shortly after the fall.
My name is Ricardo Lopez. It is January 14th, 1996. Today's my birthday. I'm 21. Now, yesterday I purchased this camera. Today I purchased the tripod. And I will begin a documentation of my life, of my art, and of my plans. Do you want to see something funny? I'm going to show you who I am. I am a monster. Can you see me smiling at you?
Ricardo Lopez grew up an introverted Uruguayan American in suburban Georgia, working odd exterminator jobs and filling his time with elaborate fantasies. By 1996, a new fixation on Icelandic singer Björk had eclipsed everything else. He wrote her adoring letters, then poured his frustration into an 803-page diary, and more than 20 hours of video monologues that chart an accelerating slide into delusion and self-loathing. When tabloids revealed Björk's brief romance with British musician Goldie, Lopez's idol worship turned into racist fury.
Look at this beautiful face. This cute, innocent, sweet and shy thing. Whoa. She's fucking a Can you believe that? Yes. Fucking nigga. That's unacceptable.
He abandoned daydreams of meeting her and began assembling a hollowed-out book rigged to spray concentrated sulfuric acid, mailed across the Atlantic on the morning of September 12, 1996. Back in his Hollywood, Florida apartment, Lopez set up his camera. For a final tape he labeled Last Day. With Björk's music looping, he stripped naked, shaved off his hair and eyebrows, and painted his face in streaks of red and green. Staring into the lens, he explained in a flat voice that the gun beside him was ready to roll.
It's 12, and I'm almost ready to roll. I'm not nervous at all, actually. I'm gonna write some things for the FBI. I'm gonna start painting that thing now.
When the song ended, he yelled either victory or this is for you, before taking the gun and
Picture you!
4 days later, neighbors complained about a foul odor. Police entered to find Lopez's decomposing body. Investigators alerted Scotland Yard, which intercepted the parcel at a South London sorting office and detonated it before it could reach Bjork. Outside her London home, on September 18th, Bjork, visibly shaken, called the episode, quote, terrible and very sad. The leaked footage of Lopez's death has since circulated widely online, preserving one of the most disturbing self-documented deaths ever committed to tape. Nguyen Van Lem, known among his comrades as Bao Lop, grew up in the Mekong Delta and spent his adult life embedded in a Viet Cong's covert network around Saigon. By the start of the Tet Offensive in early 1968, he was reportedly commanding a small revenge squad, hunting South Vietnamese officers and their families inside the city's labyrinth of alleys. In the chaotic pre-dawn hours of February 1st, his unit slipped into a police major's home. By the time they fled, the officer, his wife, their 6 children, and the officer's elderly mother lay dead. Saigon erupted in street-to-street firefights. Lem, wearing civilian clothes and carrying a pistol with an empty magazine, was pulled from a hiding place near a blown-out intersection in Cho Lon just after noon. Soldiers dragged him onto Nguyen Van Loy Street and presented him to Brigadier General Nguyen Ngoc Loan, the hard-edged chief of South Vietnam's National Police. Lem stood barefoot, with his wrists tied, eyes darting from the cameras to the revolver Loan drew from his hip. Before anyone processed what was happening, Loan shot Lem in the head. Eddie Adams' camera froze the instant of impact, while embassy cameraman Bo Su kept rolling, the frame shaking as Lem collapsed. Viewers back home saw the execution uncut that evening. The image burned into the nightly news, a single second of war stripped of uniforms, rank and distance, captured in such brutal clarity that no one who watched it ever forgot the sound of that revolver echoing down a sun-bleached Saigon street. Donald Campbell spent his childhood listening to his father, Sir Malcolm Campbell, describe the rush of speed records and the way a machine could feel alive when a throttle stayed wide open. After the war, he inherited both the family name and its obsession, pouring everything, money, engineering favors, even his marriage, into Bluebird K-7, a cobalt blue hydroplane powered by a second-hand jet engine. Through the mid-1950s, he pushed the boat faster in nervous steps, breaking the world water speed record 7 times, but never feeling he had truly eclipsed his father's legend. By the winter of 1966, he was back on Coniston Water in the Lake District, chasing 300 miles an hour because sponsors were drifting away and televised heroics still paid the bills. Dawn on January 4, 1967, arrived cold and glass flat, perfect water for his last chance run. Cameras perched on the shoreline followed Bluebird's first south-north pass, a blur of spray and turbine that clocked an official 297.6 miles per hour. Campbell radioed for an immediate return without refueling, a choice that saved time but shifted weight distribution. Halfway through the second leg, the hydroplane skinned past 320 miles per hour, then its nose lifted clear of the surface. On film, the hull seems to pause mid-air, sunlight flashing off the underside before it somersaults, shattering in an eruption of white plume and blue shards. A final radio fragment crackles, quote, "I can't see much, I'm getting a lot of bloody row," and then only wind across the water. Wreckage rained down over 200 yards. Campbell's body vanished into 70 feet of winter dark lake, along with most of the cockpit. Rescue boats circled empty ripples, their engines echoing while news crews kept rolling, capturing the slow drift of debris that marked the spots where Britain's last speed king had simply ceased. His remains were not recovered for 34 years. The film of Bluebird breaking in mid-air needed no recovery. It replayed that afternoon on every television set that still believed a man could outrun the limits of metal and water. Dawn Brancho decided she wanted to work with killer whales after a family trip to SeaWorld when she was 9. After earning a degree in psychology and animal behavior, she joined SeaWorld Orlando in 1994 and became one of its senior orca trainers, especially close to the 6-ton bull Tilikum, an orca already linked to 2 earlier fatalities. Brancho was known among her colleagues for strict adherence to safety protocols and an almost theatrical calm that kept shows running smoothly, even when the animals misbehaved. On the afternoon of February 24, 2010, she finished the Dine with Shamu program, a low-key session where a handful of guests ate lunch as she interacted with Tilikum in shallow water. Cameras, still rolling after the crowd thinned, caught her lying belly down on the slide-out platform, stroking Tilikum while chatting to onlookers. Without warning, Tilikum surged upward, clamped her ponytail in his jaws, and hauled her over the ledge. The surface exploded into white water and screams. A tourist's handheld camera kept rolling as alarms blared, and employees rushed diners toward the exits. For more than half an hour, the orca refused to release her, wrenching her body through the pool, surfacing just long enough for onlookers to glimpse her between the black and white mass of muscle and spray. Rescue staff stretched nets, blasted underwater signals, and dropped the metal gate, but Tilikum ducked and barreled away. When he finally allowed trainers to corral him into the medical pool, paramedics pulled Brancho's body onto the deck. Her scalp had been torn away, her left arm detached, cervical vertebrae shattered, ribs broken, and lungs flooded. The surveillance footage has never been made public, but fragments shown in court and later documentaries convey the sickening violence that's unfolded. Daniel Victor Jones was a 40-year-old hotel maintenance man from Long Beach, California, who spent most evenings in a cramped bungalow editing home movies of his dog, Gladys. In early 1998, he learned he was HIV positive, and weeks later, that a stubborn neck mass was cancer. Convinced his HMO was stonewalling treatment, he recorded a furious videotape on the morning of April 30th, packed the cassette, cans of gasoline, a shotgun, and Gladys into his pickup and headed for the tangle of ramps where the Harbor and Century freeways cross South Los Angeles. Just after 3 in the afternoon, he parked on the elevated connector, blocking traffic in both directions. He unfurled a hand-painted banner saying, quote, "HMOs are in it for the money. Live free, love safe, or die." Weighted it with the water jug and fired a shot over the railing to keep cruisers at a distance. News helicopters orbiting overhead fed the standoff live to every major Los Angeles station. Drivers abandoned their cars below. Viewers at home saw the lone figure pacing the concrete ribbon, the dog yelping inside the car. After 40 restless minutes, Jones splashed gasoline over the seats and struck a match. Flames flashed through the cabin. Cameras kept a tight frame as he climbed back to the truck, pulled out the shotgun, and, still in full view, did what he'd intended to do this whole time. At 3:50 p.m., the cameras caught the horrifying image of Daniel turning the gun on himself, the image lingering for a breath before directors finally cut away. Troopers in hazmat suits retrieved the cassettes from the smoldering wreck and also found the scorched remains of Daniel's dog, Gladys.
There's an old chestnut in local television news: if it bleeds, it leads, which is a rather direct way of saying the public seems to have a never-ending appetite for crime and violence. Last week in Los Angeles, a man parked his truck on a bridge connecting 2 freeways and fired some shots. At least 8 local stations did what they always do, sent news helicopters to the scene and broke in with live coverage of the event. There, on live television, with some stations interrupting children's programs, the man killed himself. Howard Rosenberg, TV critic for the Los Angeles Times, dismissed the flood of apologies from anchors and management. He charged local stations play Russian roulette with live coverage and got just the kind of violent climax they secretly want. Before we get too self-righteous about this, let's admit it. If the public didn't watch, if the ratings didn't go up, stations wouldn't put on this kind of stuff. As Nightline's John Donvan reports, in this case, all sides thought they knew what they were getting into.
Darrell Edward Lunsford was 49, a longtime county constable who split his days between night patrol on US 59 and running a small garage in Garrison, Texas. Around 1:20 a.m. on January 23, 1991, his cruiser's dash-mounted camera began recording as he pulled over an Oldsmobile Cutlass with main plates. The tape later showed polite conversation with 3 occupants, brothers Valdemar and Ronaldo Villarreal, and their friend Jesus Sombrano. Then Lunsford's request to inspect the trunk. When the lid came up, he saw tightly wrapped bundles of marijuana. Before he could move, Valdemar stepped out. The footage captured both brothers closing in, knocking Lunsford off balance and forcing him to the ground on the shoulder. In the struggle, they wrestled away his .357 Magnum service revolver. A single shot, partly muffled by the men's bodies, ended the fight. They dragged him into the roadside grass, returned to the car, and drove north, leaving the cruiser idling with the lights still flashing. The unbroken recording provided a clear view of their faces and the license plate, leading investigators to the trio within days. Lunsford's camera documented the entire encounter start to finish, a stark, grainy record of a traffic stop that turned fatal in less than 2 minutes. Jun Li was a 33-year-old Chinese national from Wuhan who had come to Canada in 2010 to study computer engineering at Concordia University in Montreal. By 2012, he was working part-time while pursuing his degree. Shortly before his death, Lin's long-term relationship ended, and he began meeting new people online. On May 24, 2012, he answered a Craigslist ad offering a private bondage roleplay session. The ad had been placed by a man named Luca Rocco Magnotta, a Montreal resident. That evening, surveillance cameras recorded Lin arriving at Magnotta's apartment building with Magnotta himself. Lin was never seen alive again. Later that night, he was brutally killed. The following day, an 11-minute video titled "One Lunatic, One Ice Pick" was uploaded online. The footage is deeply unsettling. It shows Lin tied naked to a bed frame as Magnotta stabs him repeatedly with what appears to be an ice pick, later identified as a screwdriver, and a kitchen knife. The film then cuts to Lin's body being carved apart. Magnotta is seen methodically slicing chunks of flesh from a corpse with a knife and fork. In one especially chilling scene, a small black puppy appears and licks the victim's exposed torso. All the while, the New Order song, True Faith, plays on a loop in the background. A medical examination later confirmed that Lin had been stabbed about 55 times and his throat deeply cut. Investigators concluded he almost certainly bled to death before much of the mutilation was filmed. In the days that followed, grim evidence of Lin's fate emerged. A janitor discovered Lin's headless torso in a suitcase behind Magnotta's apartment building. Mailroom staff intercepted parcels sent to Ottawa offices containing Lin's severed left hand and foot. These grisly findings, together with the murder video, left no doubt about what happened to Jun Li. Magnotta fled Canada, but was soon arrested in Berlin. In December 2014, a jury convicted him of first-degree murder, and he received a life sentence. Joe Don Romero was 33, a father of 3 boys, and recently paroled felon with an old weapons conviction hanging over him. Warrants for violating that parole was still active when he rear-ended another driver on the edge of Phoenix just before noon on September 28, 2012. Instead of exchanging insurance, Romero pulled a handgun, commandeered a red Dodge Caliber, and fled west on Interstate 10, firing at patrol cars that tried to close a distance, and firing around toward a television helicopter shadowing the pursuit from above. Fox News cut into regular program as the chase crossed open desert near Tonopah, about 50 miles from the city. Anchor Shepard Smith, working with what was supposed to be a 5-second delay, narrated while the chopper's long lens kept Romero in frame. Viewers saw the SUV leave the highway, bump through sparse scrub, and stop short in a clearing. Romero stumbled out, glanced over his shoulder, and jogged a few paces before drawing the pistol from his waistband. The shot that followed was unmistakable. Smith yelled to cut the feed, but the delay failed. The incident aired live for several agonizing seconds before the control room dumped to a commercial.
No, get off it. My name is Doug.
Police reached the spot moments later and confirmed that Joe Don Romero was dead. In the days after, network executives apologized, calling the broadcast severe human error. Romero's relatives learned what happened when the clip ricocheted across the internet. His children eventually watched the moment frame by frame on phones at school, turning a routine car chase spectacle into one of the most jarring deaths ever captured on live television.
Well, some splaining to do. While we were taking that car chase and showing it to you live,
When the guy pulled over and got out of the vehicle, we went on delay. So that's why I didn't talk for about 10 seconds. We created a 5-second delay, as if you were to bleep back your DVR 5 seconds. That's what we did with the picture we were showing you, so that we would see in the studio what was happening 5 seconds before you did, so that if anything went horribly wrong, we'd be able to cut away from it without subjecting you to it. And we really messed up. And we're all very sorry. That didn't belong on TV. We took every precaution we knew how to take to keep that from being on TV. And I personally apologize to you that that happened. Sometimes we see a lot of things that we don't let get to you because it's not time appropriate, it's insensitive, it's just wrong. And that was wrong. And that won't happen again on my watch. And I'm sorry. We'll update you on what happened with that guy and how that went down tonight on the Fox Report. I'm sorry.
Gleb Koroblev was born in Moscow in 2001, and by the time he turned 18, had just begun university. Friends remembered him as quiet and oddly formal, more comfortable online than in lecture halls. Some said he complained of a worsening heart condition, though nothing was confirmed. In the early hours of October 17, 2019, he opened a VK livestream. He greeted a viewer named Nikita, warning him not to call Koroblev's parents too quickly, and set a Saiga 12 rifle upright beside the chair, before revealing why he had the gun there. After he had done that, the stream continued in complete silence, apart from the camera's own cooling fan. It went unattended for more than 2 hours, until police finally entered the room. A Gore site re-upload titled 1444 spread within hours, clocking more than 150,000 views on YouTube before it was removed, but not before countless mirrors appeared across Telegram, TikTok, and Discord. The plain 1-minute clip, the last words, and the vacant hum that followed what Koroblev did, turned him into an unintentional fixture of internet folklore, and placed his death among the most replayed suicides ever captured on camera. Ronald Merle McNutt was 33, an Iraq War reservist from New Albany, Mississippi, who held a day job at the Toyota plant after coming home in 2008. He carried untreated PTSD, lost his girlfriend that summer, and drank hard to blunt the noise inside his head. On the night of August 31st, 2020, he launched a Facebook Live session from a cluttered apartment bedroom, a half-empty whiskey bottle beside the keyboard, and an old rifle propped against the desk. Viewers at first heard the casual chat he often used as therapy, then watched him fire a loose shot into the ceiling. Friends spam reported the feed while police took positions outside, but the stream stayed up. McNutt's phone rang over and over. The final line came from his ex. When the line went dead, he looked into the webcam and said, "Hey guys, I guess that's it," and then sadly did what everyone knew he was going to do. Officers waited until the echo faded before entering. By then, the feed had been live nearly 2 hours. Facebook finally cut it, but not before hundreds of viewers captured screen recordings. In the next 48 hours, the clips slipped onto TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube, sometimes hidden behind cat videos, sometimes looped for shock value, igniting a scramble that the platforms have never really fully contained. Brian Douglas Wells was 46 and had spent more than a decade delivering pies for Mamma Mia's Pizzeria in Erie, Pennsylvania. Regulars knew him as mild and punctual, content to work the late shift, smoke a little, and tinker with crossword puzzles during lulls. On the afternoon of August 28, 2003, the shop dispatched him to a TV tower access road at the city's edge. Investigators later said he met conspirators there who locked a metal collar bomb around his neck, gave him a shotgun disguised as a cane, and handed him 9 pages of scavenger hunt instructions. At 2:30 p.m., bank cameras captured Wells stepping into a PNC branch on Peach Street. He sucked a lollipop while sliding a note that demanded $250,000 and warned the collar would explode in 15 minutes. The teller managed only $8,702. Minutes later, troopers stopped his Geo Metro in a strip mall lot. News crews reached the scene before the bomb squad. Videos show Wells sitting cross-legged on the pavement, wrists cuffed, the grey collar resting against his collarbones. He told officers it was counting down and asked if anyone could remove it. At 3:18, the mechanism whirred, 3 rapid beeps sounded, and a dull blast tore a hole through his chest, knocking him flat. Troopers kept their distance as bits of plastic and metal clinked off patrol cars. The cameras remained fixed on the motionless body. Over the next few years, the FBI traced the device, the handwritten clues, and the tower rendezvous to a ring led by Marjorie Deal Armstrong and William Rothstein. Courts eventually decided Wells had agreed to rob the bank, believing the bomb was a prop, yet even his accomplices admitted no one told him it would actually detonate. Slobodan Praljak grew up in Kapelgina, the son of an engineer, and drifted from electrical engineering to filmmaking and philosophy in Zagreb before the wars of the 1990s pulled him into uniform. As a Bosnian Croat general, he ordered artillery that smashed the medieval Stari Most Bridge and hit surrounding neighborhoods. Prosecutors tied civilian deaths and forced expulsions to his command. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia sentenced him to 20 years in 2013, though he insisted the court had distorted his role. On November 29, 2017, the appeals chamber in The Hague delivered its judgment while cameras streamed live. When the judges upheld the conviction, Praljak rose, said, quote, "I am not a war criminal," lifted a pocket-sized brown vial. For a moment, no one moved, and he collapsed into his chair. The microphone caught him muttering that he had taken poison. The presiding judge froze, ordered the curtains drawn, and medics rushed in as the feed cut to a blank screen. He reached HMT hospital within minutes, but potassium cyanide had already stopped his heart and lungs. Physicians pronounced him dead just after 2:30 p.m., 72 years old. An inquiry later confirmed the vial contained cyanide, and struggled to explain how a defendant in one of the world's most heavily guarded courtrooms had smuggled a lethal dose to turn a verdict in his final televised act. Shinzo Abe was born into a dynasty of Liberal Democrat Party power brokers in 1954 and climbed their ranks to become Japan's longest-serving prime minister, steering the country through economic doldrums and an increasingly tense Pacific. After stepping down in 2020 for health reasons, he remained his party's busiest campaigner. On the morning of July 8, 2022, he stood on a traffic island outside Nara's Yamato Saidaiji station, giving a slump speech for an LDP candidate. Handheld phones streamed the scene. One captured a figure 30 feet behind him, raising a crudely boxed double-barreled gun. 2 thunderclips cut through Abe's sentence. Smoke burst around the gunman as lead slugs punched into Abe's neck and heart. Cameras kept rolling while the former premier's face blanked. His knees buckled, and he fell backwards onto the asphalt. Security detail wrestled the shooter, Tetsuya Yamagami, to the ground, revealing a weapon lashed together from metal pipe and plywood. Broad daylight showed the blood that spread across Abe's white shirt as medics performed chest compressions beside scattered campaign leaflets. An air ambulance lifted him to Nara Medical University Hospital within minutes. Surgeons transfused liters of blood, but the wounds had shredded an artery. At 5:03 p.m., he was declared dead at 67. Investigators later said Yamagami blamed Abe for his family's ruinous donations to the Unification Church and practiced with homemade firearms for months, turning one of modern Japan's safest public spaces into the stage for a televised political assassination. Joe Burris grew up in Fresno dreaming of eclipsing Houdini, but worked mostly as a birthday party magician and part-time painter. After a stint in rehab, he rebranded himself Amazing Joe, telling reporters that spectacular escapes would put his name beside the greats. On Halloween night 1990, he set up his most ambitious stunt in the parking lot of Blackbeard's Family Fun Center. A clear acrylic coffin, handcuffs and padlocks, a 7-foot pit, and a cement truck waiting to pour 7 tons of wet mix over him. The year before, he had pulled off the same trick using only dirt. This time he skipped a weight test, convinced the thicker walls of the new coffin would hold. Local news crews rolled tape as workers lowered the sealed box into the ground. Cement splashed and steam rose in the cool air. Seconds after the last load hit, a muffled crack sounded, first like a branch snapping, then a low crunch, before the lid imploded. The slurry and surrounding soil collapsed, burying Burris under a shifting grey mound while the crowd still applauded. Thinking it was part of the show, stagehands hesitated, then clawed at the pit with shovels until firefighters arrived with backhoes and floodlights. It took nearly half an hour to reach the coffin. The acrylic walls had shattered inward, pinning Burris in a kneeling position with his face pressed into broken plastic. Paramedics found no pulse. He was 32. Late-night footage showed rescuers lifting his crushed, mud-slick body as the cameraman's lens fogged, the unfinished applause tapering into stunned silence. Franco Scolio was a veteran Italian football coach and manager. Over a long career, he led clubs such as Genoa, Regina, and Messina, and even managed national teams like Tunisia and Libya. In later years, he became a familiar face on Italian sports television, working as a popular commentator on local Genoa area football programs. On the evening of October 3, 2005, Scolio was a guest on a live sports talk show broadcast by Primo Canale, a regional Genoese TV station. The program featured a telephone call-in with Enrico Preziosi, the president of Genoa CFC. The discussion was spirited and at times heated, but remained civil. During the debate, after making a point to Preziosi, Scolio suddenly lost consciousness. He slumped in his chair as viewers watched live on TV. Studio cameras captured the moment in real time. Producers immediately cut the broadcast and summoned emergency medics. Paramedics worked urgently to revive Scolio, but he could not be resuscitated. He was later pronounced dead at the studio. Authorities said he suffered a fatal heart attack during the broadcast. Scolio was 64 years old. Maritza Martin Munoz grew up in Cuba and rebuilt her life in South Florida, working factory shifts and raising her 15-year-old daughter Yoandra after a bruising divorce from truck driver Emilio Nunez. When Yoandra hanged herself in November 1992, 3 months pregnant and tormented by family conflict, Nunez blamed Martin for everything, telling Spanish-language reporters that the girl had been, quote, murdered by her own mother. On the morning of January 18, 1993, a Telemundo crew met Nunez at Our Lady Queen of Heaven Cemetery in North Lauderdale. Their segment for the tabloid show, O Curio Así, opened with Nunez kneeling at the fresh grave, speaking in broken sobs to the camera. Halfway through the take, Martin's blue sedan rolled up. Nunez pointed her out. Reporter Ingrid Cruz marched to the driver's window, shoving a microphone through the glass. Martin stayed silent, wrote Nunez's license plate in a small notebook, and started toward the headstone, eyes fixed on the grass. Nunez disappeared behind his SUV, returned seconds later clutching a 9mm semi-automatic, and fired point blank into the back of Martin's skull. The camera jerked, but never stopped recording, and Martin crumpled face first into the gravel as 5 more rounds tore through her sweater. The tape caught Nunez sprinting towards his SUV and fishtailing out of the cemetery, while wind rattled the microphone. Paramedics pronounced Martin dead beside the grave she shared with her daughter. She was 33 and left an 18-month-old son. Nunez fled across state lines, was arrested on a Texas bus 3 days later, and in 2000, a Broward County judge sentenced him to life with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The raw footage surfaced in shock documentaries and still circulates. Philip LaForce Hutchinson was born in Arlington County, Virginia in 1963, drifted out to the Marines, and piled up convictions for kidnapping and armed robbery long before Texas handed him a life sentence. He escaped a prison work detail in July 1987 and surfaced in Denver 6 months later, broke and still hunting cash. Just before noon on February 9, 1988, he strolled into the Rio Grande Operating Credit Union with a .357 and a battered suitcase, snatched roughly $3,000 and tore off in a brown Chevy Blazer. Patrol cars closed in within minutes, but he ran through traffic, clipped bumpers, and, in a single violent swerve at West 48th and Tennyson, struck Detective Robert Wallace as the officer stepped from an unmarked cruiser. Wallace died where he landed, his body thrown the length of a half football field, while a KCNC-TV helicopter happened to be overhead filming highway construction. The chopper crew, pilot Mike Silver and cameraman Jim Stair, latched onto the fleeing Blazer, broadcasting every turn. When Hutchinson crashed into a tree, he bolted on foot, fired at a mother's car, and hijacked 73-year-old John Norienti's pickup. With police radios still guessing his location, Silver dropped the helicopter under power lines and planted it nose to grill in front of the truck. The blades whipped dust around the windshield, Hutchinson aimed his gun toward the cockpit, then spun back toward officers racing in. A cruiser rammed the pickup's wheel. Officers flanked the door, and a tight volley of shots punched the cab. The helicopter's camera rolled as Hutchinson's head sagged, and Laurienti was dragged to safety, unhurt. Hutchinson died on the pavement at 24. The suitcase money scattered across the road, while the live feed cut back to the studio in stunned silence. Olga Gaikovich was 29, a logistics clerk from Russia on a family road trip through Rostov Oblast with her husband Vadim, his brother, and a toddler in the back seat. Late morning on June 11, 2012, their Audi A4 cruised the two-lane stretch between Azov and Peshkovo, while a Cam AZ flatbed rumbled past in the opposite lane, its load stacked with shrink-wrapped pallets of bricks. Dashcam footage showed the convoy look ordinary, until one bundle fractured. Several bricks sprang free, with one flying across the center line and punching through the Audi's windshield. Glass cracked in a white flash, and the bricks slammed into Gajkovich's temple. The camera kept rolling as the interior filled with dust, and Vadim's voice cracked with shock into ragged sobs. She never spoke. The blow had already fractured her skull. Paramedics reached them within minutes and rushed her to Azov City Hospital, but surgeons declared her dead 2 hours later. Police stopped the truck inside Azov and opened a criminal case against the driver for unsecured cargo, noting 16 tons of bricks had been strapped down with frayed webbing. The unedited dashcam clip features no gore, just sunlight, a flying brick, and the sound of a family coming apart, spread across the internet as the, quote, Russian brick video. Kim Jong-nam, born in 1971, as Kim Jong-il's first son, spent his adult life adrift between Beijing, Macau, and Singapore after a 2001 arrest with a fake passport cost him his place as heir to North Korea's throne. He financed the limbo with casino nights and occasional interviews that mocked his half-brother, Kim Jong-un, living under loose Chinese protection and traveling on the alias Kim Chol. Shortly before 9 a.m. on February 13, 2017, he walked into Kuala Lumpur International Airport's low-cost terminal, a backpack over one shoulder and an AirAsia boarding pass to Macau in his pocket. CCTV recorded two women closing in from opposite sides of the departure hall, Indonesian Siti Aisyah and Vietnamese Don Thi Huang. Each pressed gloved hands across his eyes and mouth, then hurried to the bathroom to rinse a clear, oily liquid from their fingers. To bystanders, it looked like a slapstick prank. To Kim, it felt like acid burning through his eyelids. He stumbled to the check-in desk, gestured at his face, and whispered that someone had sprayed liquid on him. Security escorts caught his collapse on another camera, sweat beading, pupils pinpointing, limbs shaking as VX nerve agents shut down his muscles one by one. Medics wheeled him through customs, but the toxin had already paralyzed his diaphragm. At Putrajaya Hospital, less than 20 minutes after arrival, age 45, forensic teams found VX traces on both women's clothes and on the wipes they tossed into the restroom bin. The silent airport footage, two casual pats, a dazed stagger, a sudden slide to the floor, became the clearest film ever made of a state-ordered chemical assassination playing out in public daylight. Riccardo Paletti grew up in Milan's industrial outskirts and raced anything he could fit into before his 20th birthday. Karts, then Formula 3, then the bruising European Formula 2 series, where his raw pace earned him a last-minute seat with the tiny Osella squad for the 1982 Formula 1 season. The car was stubborn and underfunded, but Canada on June 13th looked like a chance to finish his first Grand Prix. He lined up 23rd on the grid, helmet visor already fogging in the humid Montreal air. When the red lights went out, pole sitter Didier Pironi's Ferrari stalled dead ahead. Drivers scattered, squeezing through gaps no wider than their mirrors. From the back, Paletti had almost no time to react. 180 kilometers an hour bled away in half a heartbeat, yet the Osella still speared straight into the motionless Ferrari. The impact crushed the nose, shoved the steering column through his chest, and split the full fuel cell. A sheet of fire rolled across the grid, and broadcast cameras caught the moment Pironi, still strapped in his car, tried to climb clear.
And the car's caught fire! The driver is still in the car! They're going to get onto the job right now. He's got a medical air supply in there. They're getting the firefighting onto it. They're trying to get it out. They're getting the fire under control. Come on, lads, get more fire in there. More extinguishers. Get in there. Yes, this is going to be difficult because there's 40 gallons of fuel in that car. The driver is obviously trapped in the car. They're approaching the driver now. One of his mechanics has come over. Didi Pironi is getting a fire extinguisher. He's getting into the fire. Didi Pironi in the lead overalls here trying to direct one of the fire officials. This is the start of the race, the very first lap. Remember, the car's only left the starting grid. An enormous amount of smoke, toxics around there, potentially very dangerous.
We don't know which of Jarier or Paletti are the two. It's Paletti, I believe, that is in the car.
The car looks as if there's still flame there. I hope somebody has pressed his medical air supply.
Paletti, I believe, is the driver in the Oscilla. Paletti, the Italian driver.
It took rescue crews more than 20 seconds to quell the fire, and nearly 5 minutes to cut him free. Even then, he lay silent, eyes half open behind a melted visor. On the way to Montreal's Sacré-Cœur Hospital, his heart stopped twice. Surgeons restarted it once, but the internal damage was beyond repair. Riccardo Paletti was pronounced dead at 23. The race continuing as dusk settled over a scorched start line. Eddie Sachs was a veteran USAC driver known as, quote, the Clown Prince of auto racing. He had started the Indy 500 every year from 1957 through 1964. Even winning the pole position in 1960 and 1961, Sachs was a natural showman. He famously quipped, quote, if you can't win, be spectacular. A fitting motto for a driver of his era. By 1964, he was behind the wheel of a classic front-engine roadster, looking for another strong finish in the 500. On the second lap of the 1964 race, disaster struck. Rookie Dave McDonald's car spun out of control off turn 4 and slammed into the inside wall. The impact tore open the fuel tank. A 45-gallon load of gasoline sprayed onto the hot engine and immediately ignited. A gigantic fireball erupted, sending orange flames and thick black smoke swirling across the track. Eddie Sachs, running close behind, saw an opening on the outside, but McDonald's burning car suddenly blocked his path. Sachs plowed into the broadside of the blazing machine, triggering a second massive explosion. The film of the crash captured Sachs's red roadster slamming into the inferno and bursting into flame. It was instantly fatal. Sachs and McDonald were both killed in the fiery 7-car accident on that lap. For viewers of the archived footage, the scene was truly harrowing. The camera showed nothing but fire and smoke. One driver later recalled that, quote, the whole track was blocked with fire. It looked like 10 cars were turning. In the grainy film, Sachs's bright red car could be seen just before the impact, a flash of red in the smoke, and then the moment of explosion. Crews rushed toward the burning wreck, and eventually Sachs' shattered roadster was towed away under a tarp. Those final images, a roaring fireball, an empty track, and broken race cars, was stark and silent, a shocking and unforgettable end to Eddie Sachs' story. Luis Donaldo Colosio was a rising star in Mexican politics. He had been handpicked by President Carlos Gortari as the Institutional Revolutionary Party's presidential candidate, effectively making him the frontrunner for Mexico's next election. The PRI had governed Mexico virtually unbroken throughout the 20th century. Colosio, an economist by training and former congressman and cabinet minister, vowed to fight poverty and corruption. He styled himself as a, quote, man of the people, and often moved through crowds with minimal security. By early 1994, Mexico was on edge. An armed uprising in the southern state of Chiapas had erupted in January, and many citizens were hungry for change. Still, Colosio pressed on with his campaign. On March 23, 1994, he traveled to Tijuana for a late afternoon rally in the Lomas Taurinas neighborhood. Colosio arrived in a good mood just after 4 p.m., smiling and greeting supporters as lively music played in the background. Minutes later, the unthinkable happened. Television cameras were rolling as Colosio walked slowly through the packed courtyard. Filmed from behind the crowd, the video clearly showed his moving among the people. Without warning, and almost before anyone realized what was happening, a black pistol suddenly appeared above his right shoulder and fired once. The shot struck Colosio in the head. The cheering erupted into chaos. The crowd screamed in horror. On the video, Colosio's hand flew to his temple as he crumpled face first onto the dirt. Crimson blood immediately stained his forehead and soaked the white collar of his shirt. Bystanders acted in a frenzy. They lunged at the gunman, tackling him and beating him with fists and feet. Coliseo lay motionless in the dust as aides and medics gathered around. He was rushed to a nearby hospital, but hours later he was pronounced dead. The raw footage of the assassination, the sudden flash of violence, the spray of blood, the stunned crowd, was broadcast all across Mexico. Kevin Whitrick was a 42-year-old British father of two who had recently been struggling with severe depression. In early 2007, he had separated from his wife and was still recovering from a serious car accident. Late on March 21, 2007, Kevin logged into an online insults video chat room on Paltalk. Around 50 strangers were present. Kevin quietly announced that he was going to kill himself. At first, some viewers thought it was a cruel prank. Then Kevin climbed onto a punched a hole in his ceiling, tied a to a beam, and placed it around his. He kicked the chair away, and you can probably guess what happened next. A stunned silence fell in the chat room. Those watching later described how Kevin's face changed during the event. Some viewers began to type please, urging him to come down. A few panicked and tried to identify his home to call the police. Others typed cruel messages and insults. One witness later recounted, quote, "Some of us tried to convince him to step down, but others egged him on, telling him to get on with it." Profanity-laced taunts continued to stream in towards Kevin as the stream went on. Within minutes, somebody contacted emergency services. Officers forced their way into Kevin's flat, but he was pronounced dead at 11:15 p.m. In the aftermath, investigators noted it was Britain's first known suicide broadcast live online. Detectives traced many of the chat room participants and gathered logs, but ultimately no one was charged. Daijiro Kato was a Japanese MotoGP racer, a former 250cc world champion, who by 2003 was competing in the Premier class with Honda. On April 6, 2003, at the Suzuka Grand Prix, Kato was slowing down from the high-speed 130R corner and braking into the chicane when his rear tyres suddenly lost grip. The bike veered sharply to the left and its left side violently struck a tyre barrier, then smashed into a foam wall. The impact threw Kato off his machine and into the air. He was flung headfirst into the foam barrier, then hurled like a spinning disc as he flew through the air. He landed face up on the tarmac about 30 meters beyond the barriers. Cameras captured the crash in real time. Viewers saw the bike flip into the wall and Kato lying motionless. He was unconscious immediately. Marshals and medical staff responded within seconds. 4 rescuers knelt over his body and lifted him gently by the shoulders, torso and legs onto a stretcher. They tried to keep his neck and head aligned, though the investigation noted his head did slip back as he was moved. An ambulance arrived and medics continued care en route. The race was not stopped. It continued under caution while marshals carried Kato off the track. Kato never regained consciousness. He was flown to a hospital, but 2 weeks later, on April 20th, doctors announced he had died from the brainstem injuries sustained in the crash. Harry Collinson had been a long-serving planning officer at Derwentwater District Council. On June 20, 1991, he led a council team out to a rural lane near Buttsfield to serve a demolition order on a bungalow that Albert Dryden had built without permission. Collinson was familiar with the site. He'd even advised Dryden on tree planting and permissible work there, and he insisted the demolition take place in daylight, with TV cameras present to ensure transparency. TV crews from BBC and other outlets were on hand to film the confrontation. For a tense moment, the scene remained almost normal. Collinson and his colleagues spoke quietly over the garden fence. At one point, Collinson even asked the camera to zoom in on Dryden's pistol. The camera panned just in time. In that instant, Dryden drew a Webley revolver and pulled the trigger. A single gunshot cracked through the air and Collinson lurched out of view, struck by the bullet. Immediately, the cameraman's image began to shake as officials, journalists and bystanders scrambled for cover. Dryden then climbed over the fence and walked across the yard. 2 more shots rang out into the ditch where Collinson had fallen. Meanwhile, the BBC reporter Tony Belmont and a police constable, Stephen Campbell, were hit as they tried to flee.
We were standing watching what was going on. The chief planner was trying to persuade the chap to move out the way and let the digger go in. And then a shot rang out at the chief planner, fell to the ground, and I felt a shot in the arm, and I've clearly been shot here in the arm. I'm now hopefully going to get some medical treatment. policeman was also shot in the buttock here, and the councillor was shot in the chest.
The footage is chilling in its darkness. It shows a sunny country lane, shattered by gunfire and panic. Collinson's limp body in the ditch, Belmont clutching his arm, the police officer crumpled on the grass. The gunshots and shouts are captured in real time. In fact, the BBC Look North Evening Bulletin aired the tape that night, meaning thousands of viewers saw the killing unfold. What makes the recording especially disturbing is its immediacy. Collins' calm request for a camera shot of the gun, followed seconds later by the crack of the pistol, and the sudden cascade of terrified voices and running feet. Zhao Kui-mei was a 23-year-old crane operator in Quzhou, China, who had become a minor social media celebrity by sharing videos of her job. A mother of 2 young daughters, she regularly live-streamed from the tower crane she worked on, gaining about 100,000 followers on TikTok. In mid-July 2021, after a day's work was done, Zhao remained atop a nearly 50-meter-tall crane in the western Zhejiang province. Around 5:40 p.m., as co-workers were leaving the site, she began recording a video in the crane's cabin. A few moments later, everything went horribly wrong. According to reports, Zhao missed a step on the crane ladder and began to fall. Her phone was in hand and continued recording as she plummeted. The camera view suddenly jerked. The lens swung from the crane cabin to the open air. Metal girders and parts of the crane spun past the lens in a blur. A brief terrified scream can be heard in the audio. Then, as the phone hit the ground or plunged out of range, the footage abruptly ended. This raw point-of-view footage, recorded by Zhao's own phone, soon circulated online. News outlets in China and abroad reported that viewers saw her final seconds from an unflinching first-person perspective, shaking images of sky and steel, and the sound of her shriek as she fell. The clip went viral on Chinese platforms and was picked up by international media. Viewers found it deeply unsettling because it offered no escape or framing, only the reality of Zhao's last moments. Butch Laswell was born in Las Vegas and raised in Overton, Nevada. From a young age, he idolized Evel Knievel, building ramps and jumping everything from cars to bicycles. He turned professional in his late teens, and by 1981, he set a world distance jump record of 180 feet. Over the next 2 decades, he amazed audiences worldwide and completed more than 5,000 jumps with a perfect safety record. On March 10, 1996, Laswell attempted what he planned as the highest jump of his career. Outside the New Oasis Hotel and Casino in Mesquite, Nevada, he raced his Honda CR500 up a 27-foot ramp at roughly 70 miles per hour, soaring over the 38-foot-high pedestrian skywalk bridge above the street. Mid-flight, a sudden gust of wind struck his bike and pushed it off course. Laswell came down several feet left of the intended landing ramp, crashing hard onto the pavement. Witnesses later said he even tried to steer the falling bike away from the crowd as he went down. The crash was caught on multiple cameras filming the event live. The crowd of about 5,000 spectators fell silent, then surged forward as police and medics rushed to the scene. The footage shows the motorcycle flipping and skidding across the asphalt, while Laswell was thrown violently off the bike. He lay motionless on the road as emergency crews worked over him. Laswell was loaded into an ambulance and then flown by helicopter toward a Las Vegas hospital, but his injuries were too severe. He was pronounced dead a short time later during the medevac transport. Hector Duarte was 18 years old. Desperate for cash to buy drugs, he tried to rob a bakery in Cuau, Venezuela on April 5, 1998. The robbery went wrong. Police shot Duarte in the arm, and he ran into a nearby apartment building and took the residents inside as hostages. Inside that building, Duarte held 44-year-old Nancy Lopez, who was pregnant, at gunpoint, along with members of her family. In panic, he even shot 2 of the hostages. He then emerged onto the street with Nancy, with a pistol pressed to her temple, demanding a getaway car. Police cordoned off the area, and for 7 tense hours, negotiators tried to reach Duarte. Late that afternoon, Duarte was still holding Nancy tightly on the street. Suddenly, a sniper's rifle rang out. Television cameras captured the moment a single bullet hit Duarte in the head. He died instantly. Duarte collapsed at Nancy's feet. Moments later, Nancy Lopez staggered away, and officers rushed to her side while Duarte lay dead on the pavement. Officers later said there had been no choice but to shoot Duarte. Nancy Lopez survived with only minor injuries, and the 2 hostages Duarte had wounded in the building also lived. But the footage itself needed no explanation. It was shown nationwide and even used in crime documentaries. Okay, spoiler, I'm not going to show any of the footage from this case, because if I did, the entire screen would be nothing but one big blur. That's how horrific this is. Alejandra Eco Chup was a 32-year-old woman from Alta Verapaz, Guatemala. She lived in the rural village of San Miguel del Norte in Chisec with her partner, Mario Osvaldo. Alejandra was the mother of 3 young children. Osvaldo was married to another woman and had 7 children of his own, but maintained a relationship with Alejandra. Neighbors later described him as jealous and controlling. Late in the afternoon on October 29, 2018, neighbors heard Alejandra's desperate screams echoing from her home. They rushed to the house and forced their way in. Inside, they found her collapsed on the floor of her bedroom. She had suffered a massive axe-like wound, splitting her skull, and both her hands had been cut off. Alejandra lay in a pool of her own blood, barely conscious and moaning. Villagers later said they had never seen anything like it. The sight was horrendous and deplorable. She gasped weakly as neighbors called for help. There was nothing to be done. Alejandra died from her injuries before rescuers could reach her. The raw combination of gore and suffering in the footage made it deeply unsettling, and it quickly spread across social media. Mario Osvaldo fled immediately after the killing, but 2 days later, he was tracked down in another village by angry neighbors and police. When confronted by villagers, he admitted what he had done. He said that he had attacked and killed Alejandra in a fit of jealousy because he believed she had been unfaithful. Investigators noted he had a history of violence in the years that followed. Prosecutors used witness statements and the video as evidence. On August 29, 2023, a court in Alta Verapaz convicted him of femicide and sentenced him to 50 years in prison. The brutal case and the video of Alejandra's final moments remains infamous for its sheer horror and the unforgettable images of her suffering. And that's the end of the video, folks. I had to watch a number of gore clips for this one, something I normally wouldn't have to do. I hope watching gore doesn't turn me into a weirdo with long greasy hair, a scruffy looking beard and buck teeth, who says and does a bunch of stupid shit that leads to me becoming a lolcow and having my YouTube channel terminated, but no one would be that stupid, right? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like this video, leave a comment, subscribe if you're new, and consider supporting on Patreon. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.